All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bluewater Cruising podcast. My name is Chris. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but I'm super excited to hop on today with Chris Fair, another Chris. There's two of us here today. Some of you have been watching for a while. You know what we're all about with Bluewater Cruising. Chris is a member of our programs, one of our programs. Chris, when did you join us? I forget. Like it's been 18 months or something. Is that about
It's
right?
been a little over a year,
A little over a year.
maybe 14 or so months.
14 or so months. Cool. So yeah, Chris met us about 14 months ago, came in, went through all of our trainings programs and ended up getting into a boat and starting cruising with his family, which was the dream, and then ran into a very unfortunate really act of God, is there's really no other way to put it, and is dealing with some of the highs and the lows of the cruising life. That we'll get into that as we get going. But maybe Chris, to kick us off, like, you want to give us a bit of a background on you? I know you got yourself and your whole family with you. They're not here right now, but maybe a bit of a background on you guys and how you met us. Why did you decide to get into cruising life, and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, how far back to go? I'll go really far back, but I'll make it really brief. So getting out and sailing around the world has just been something I've wanted to do for probably 16 or so years.
Okay.
I'm more of an introvert, and I'm like, hey, being alone in the middle of the ocean, that sounds awesome. Since then, I've been married. I've got two kids, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And my wife thought my dream was literally a joke. She didn't take it seriously at all until early last year. And she got on board when she saw, one, it's possible, and two, it'd be a really cool way to raise our kids. We were already homeschooling. We're already planning on doing that, so it didn't have to figure out that logistic. And I've been watching Sailing Zatara's channel since they started their channel. And so how I found Bluewater Cruising was Keith is a founding member of Bluewater Cruising, and I knew enough about sailing to know that I didn't know enough to even know what I didn't know. So I got into it because I wanted training. It turns out training isn't the biggest benefit of Bluewater Cruising. My wife quickly found out community is the biggest benefit of Bluewater Cruising. Me being an introvert, I'm like, whatever, I'm going to do the training. I'm not going to worry too much about the community thing. But it became really important really quick, even before we bought a boat, even before we started looking at boats. So, yeah, we set out looking at boats. We followed their program, even though I'm not as, let's say, calm and willing to wait. I said, well, their program probably exists for a reason, and I paid for it. I might as well follow it and see if it works. And it did. We're certainly the exception to a lot of the rules in boat buying, but ended up settling on looking for a Lagoon 620, which is an absolutely massive boat for most people, but I'm an absolutely massive person. 6.5 feet tall, I'm very wide, and every boat that Chris Biasuti, our broker, put us on our boat tour, I didn't fit on any of them except for a Lagoon 52. But it had some weird design quirks. So once we knew that, we knew of a 620 that was for sale, and we intentionally did not look at it because we wanted to look at the other 620s because we knew once we looked at it, we'd probably want to buy it. That's what happened. We ended up buying a 620 from someone in the community, and had a great time with that. It was a good process, and they even stayed on the boat with us for 4 weeks. Them and their family, me and my family, training us on how to run the boat, the quirks to look out for, the really cool systems they left on the boat for us before they went back home. And we were on the boat for 1 week. And coming out of Delaware Bay, that's when we got struck by lightning. Not an indirect strike, it was a direct strike to the starboard side of our mast. So I'll hand it back over to you, Chris, so you can drive the conversation.
Yeah, cool, man. No, thanks for the background. So, and you guys are from, there's a lot in there. You're from Texas originally, is that right?
Yeah, I am from Texas, born, raised. My wife was originally from Connecticut, but moved to Texas 12 and a half years ago when we got married,
Okay,
um, and been there ever since.
cool.
Picked up the boat in Brunswick, Georgia. That's where we set off from. That's where our home port is.
In Brunswick, Georgia. Okay. And what's like, we'll get to the lightning strike because that's like important stuff. But what, aside from the lightning strike, if we remove that from the timeline for now, what would you say the most difficult part of the process was going from 14 months ago to right before you got struck by lightning?
I think the one of the difficult parts was while me and my wife were very in alignment, we had similar visions. Um, our reasons are very different on how we arrived at those visions. So, uh, getting through the coursework, and by the way, there's separate coursework for each spouse. We need to do it independently on some of the stuff before we combine it, and that's where I think we had the most trouble with the process. Was we ended up wanting the same thing. We ended up wanting the same boat. We ended up wanting to go all the same places, but our reasons were just dramatically different. Which is fine. You need to
You're
work through
different
that
people.
stuff. And if you can't work through it on land, don't get on the boat and try to work it out there. That's not the place you technically want to be doing that discussion. So um, I think that was the most difficult part. We ended up redoing our boat budget 4 times in the process. And we ended up with a boat we love. It also ended up being at the very top of what we could afford, which, by the way, I don't recommend. Um, I literally didn't fit in smaller boats, so that's why we went there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the alignment on the plan and being clear on the mission and vision was the hardest part, which coincidentally enough is the part that most people like to skip. maybe maybe
I
because
can't
it is so
imagine
hard.
why.
Okay, cool. So then, once you figured that out, it was kind of a relatively smooth process to walk through the steps to end up with the boat. But getting that dialed in first was the hardest part.
Yep, and our boat buying process was a little non-typical. In a lot of good ways, it was non-typical. We were buying from another member of the community, and they had already had a sale plan, and we
Okay.
didn't want to dramatically interrupt their sale plan. So
Yep.
basically, we didn't want them to immediately drop everything, come to the States with the boat. We essentially said, okay, well, you are coming to the States in this time frame anyway. Let's not rush anything.
Yep.
So they did that. Worked out well for both families, and we came up the East Coast because that's where they were going. And we're like, well, we're not going to go back to the Bahamas. You've been there long enough, so we'll just go up the East Coast. Um, so it was a good thing. It was just perhaps a longer boat buying process than the average once you found the boat and put in an offer.
But you were flexible, and you were both able to be flexible because there was a relationship there and already, and yeah, you established a relationship. And I want to say for the record that it's atypical to it is not typical to have a handoff with an owner for 4 weeks. That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing that you got that. It's not untypical. That's not really a word, but it's not typical inside our community, which is I think what you mentioned, that the cool thing about the community is that everybody cares about each other. So, all right. So then we're rushing ahead here because I want to get to the meat and potatoes of what's going on for you right now. So you set off from Brunswick, sailed for 4 weeks with the previous owners of the boat, had a great time, learned the systems, and then you were on your own for a week.
I think it might have been 8 days exactly.
8 days, and where were you?
So we came up the Chesapeake with the previous owner and their family. I forget where we dropped them off. It was before Annapolis, but we came up. We actually skipped Annapolis. We had seen enough cities in the last 4 weeks, so we decided to just pick some remote anchorages. and we took the northern cut out of the Chesapeake to the Delaware. Our boat fit under all the bridges, and it would have cost us another 3 days to go back out the Chesapeake the other way. Of course, we did all the things that we were taught to do. We checked the weather, we checked the likelihood of things happening, and everything looked clear. And we were planning on doing a 2 or 3 day sail to Rhode Island. Not Rhode Island. Yeah, Rhode Island. And as we were nearing the exit of the bay, a storm system, we saw it coming up. Just looked like another squall. So we went to drop the main and had some lines get tangled. So we raised it back up, and I looked back and I'm like, okay, that looks a lot worse than it did 10 minutes ago. So we actually emergency dropped the main at that point, got all the sails pulled in, and then moved from the helm stations outside to the helm station inside. We're motoring at that point, and I checked the weather again once we were down in the main helm, and we were smack in the middle of this large area that the Coast Guard had called in an emergency weather event on. And there was zero chance I was getting out of it. We don't move fast, so we had a buddy boat following us. They were about 3 hours behind us at this point. They were catching up because they did go to Annapolis. And the storm came through, and we were about 30 minutes into that storm, and it was kind of starting to dissipate. And that's when we got struck. And then 10 minutes after that, it was gone. So we got struck at the tail end.
Was there a lot of lightning? Was there a lot of lightning in the storm? A lot of lightning.
There was. In fact, Cape May Sea Tow is a towing company we ended up getting towed out on. Spoiler alert, we got towed. And they put up a map of the lightning strike of that storm, and it was just covering the entire area of the bay we were in.
So
it was a pretty bad storm.
Hit. Multiple people got.
Yep, and so we, I don't know if I go into the description of what happened there, if you want to cover something else first.
No, I mean, tell me, like you tell me what happened. So you're in the storm, you got hit by lightning, which, that sucks in general. We've had other members, just again, that have been hit by lightning, and generally it's like an indirect hit, or it's not so bad. Maybe it knocks out, like your wind instrument or a couple other things, but you had a fairly serious or very serious lightning strike.
We did, and we wouldn't find out for days just how serious. So I was at the forward helm station, which on the Lagoon 620 is directly under the mast, more or less. Yep. So my experience of the lightning strike is very different than everybody else's experience of the lightning strike. My kids were in bed. My wife had just gone to sleep because we had been dealing with craziness.
What time was it?
Let me pull up exactly what time it was, because my boat on marine traffic is still sitting at the exact spot at the exact time of the strike. Because, spoiler alert, we have not sent an AIS transmission since that point in time. It was in the evening. It was after 8 or 9.
So it's dark.
Oh yeah, it was dark. I'll skip that for a second. So immediate what happened, huge flash, and I'm like, okay, brain instantly like, that was a hit. I did not hear the boom. I did not hear the thunder from the strike. What I did hear was all the electronics in the cabinet next to me sizzling. That's the first thing I heard, was just wires getting burned up next to me. And then silence. Almost completely, and the next thing I remember hearing is our windlass running, nonstop, spitting chain up onto the deck. Luckily, we had locked the chain in place before the trip, because it was going to be a multi-day trip.
So it wasn't dropping the anchor.
Yeah. If we hadn't, we would have lost our chain and our anchor. Because it goes pretty quick, even though we have a lot of chain. So that's what I heard. Then my wife came up, They heard the boom. That's what woke them up. They said it's insanely loud. I think why I didn't hear it is I was directly below the mast, which is a little disconcerting when I think about it. It's not where you want to be when a lightning strike happens. We would later find out the strike hit the starboard side VHF antenna and the single sideband antenna on that side. VHF antenna is just gone, nothing left of it, which I've heard very typical in these strikes. Did a quick assessment, had to go run to the electrical room and kill the windlass. Not a lot of time to look at things in there. Tried to figure out what was working, what wasn't. Engines were gone.
What was your, like, because you'd spent a bunch of time with the previous owner, so you had a decent handle on the systems. And like, so what was your immediate, like this happened and you're like, okay, we've been hit by lightning. What was your immediate like thought? What were you like, okay, like what was the first that, did you formulate, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Or was it like, okay, what happened? What do we do? And then that leads me to another question after that, which is, well, I want to know this first, but did you have a plan in advance? Had you planned out what you were thinking about doing in the event of something like this?
The first thing that happened was I thought, crap, I just got struck by lightning. That's not good. That was the first thing I thought. Yeah. And then very quickly, no, we did not have a plan in place. And that's something that we will change. We will have a better plan in place. And I'm going to use the damage that we find as we assess all the systems on the boat to figure out what a really good plan is. I did know one of the biggest risks of a lightning strike is puncturing the hull, having two holes blow out. Yeah. So the first thing I did once I realized what happened, once my wife's like, what happened, I said, hey, see if you can message our buddy boat, let them know we've been struck. So she does that. In the meantime, I'm pulling up the floor panels near our drains,
near the bilge.
The bilge, looking to see if water's coming in anywhere. Luckily, no water seems to be coming in the boat, so I'm happy. I'm like, okay, maybe the strike wasn't all that bad. My wife says, okay, I let them know we got struck. He asked if everything's okay, and I said yes. And I'm like, message him back, everything is not okay. Tell him we don't have propulsion, we don't have communications, we don't have navigation, and we don't have most of our lights anymore. Internal lights, external lights. No idea at this point what is and isn't working, except for we knew the engine wasn't working. We knew the navigation wasn't working. We were running the boat.
It killed both the engines.
Instantly. So I had the air conditioning system running and the engines running at the time of the strike. And we know it killed the engines. We're 90% sure the air conditioner system shot. We're also fairly certain the water maker shot because the plugs melted. It's a pretty good indicator. It was still raining pretty hard at this point.
Yeah.
So I did go down. I got in the electrical room and I killed the windlass. And then I got back out of there as quickly as possible because the batteries are not sealed in our setup. So I did not want heavy rain coming in while I was down there. So closed that off. Then went up to the flybridge to check on a handful of things like, can I get the engine started? Do I have anything up here? The answer is no. We didn't have anything up there. I was able to turn on some lights under the bimini. So I did turn those on. But my mast lights were shot. The only thing that ended up working on the flybridge was our winches. Our winches were still operable. And I was looking to make sure nothing was flying around, like on the mainsail, made sure it stayed down, made sure everything up there. And when I went to come back under the bimini to go back downstairs, I nail my head on the bimini. And I'm like, that shouldn't have happened. And I look up, and the boom is sitting on the bimini. Like, it fell on the bimini, and I'm like, how? I have no idea how. The top line was still there. Best guess, lightning heated it up enough to where it fell and it bent the bimini. We were able to tighten it up again to get it off the bimini and block it off. But still a mystery there. But it did bend our bimini. Doesn't look like it broke the solar up there, but at the same time, pretty sure the solar didn't survive either.
Yeah. What kind of comms did you have to be able to you contacted your buddy boat, so you had some sort of comms, so it didn't take out cell phones?
Cell phones we had. In fact, it didn't take out any handheld devices on the boat.
Okay. And
So
where
if it
were
wasn't-
those? Where were they? They were just in your pockets, or
My cell phone was sitting at the helm station in front of me, along with our tablet that we had running almost everything on the boat. And my wife had her cell phone on the starboard back room with her.
and they were all fine.
They were all fine. What's amazing is I thought I must have had Starlink still up and running because we could use our cell phones. We got Google Fi. So she was able to send the message to the buddy boat, and we asked him to call into the Coast Guard for us because we didn't have radios. We actually did have handheld radios. I just didn't know where they were on the boat. So know where your emergency equipment is. I could tell you where the flares were and all kinds of other stuff, but not the backup radios. So the Coast Guard Sheriff's Department called me first, asked for details, and then the Coast Guard called me after that. I didn't even know there's a Coast Guard station at Cape May, but there is. So they sent out a boat, and they straight up said, well, there's not much we can do for you, because I asked how much my boat weighed, and I told them 32 tons. And they said, well, our only option for you is going to be see if you're all right, and we can get you and your family off the boat. We can't tow your boat because they have some interesting regulations. So we ended up getting in contact with Sea Tow there in Cape May, and they sent out a hilariously smaller than the Coast Guard boat and got us pulled back into Cape May. So that was an interesting all-around experience. Our buddy boat caught up to us about the time the tow company had us hooked up.
Give me a timeline on that. So that's like you get hit by lightning. Coast Guard comes out an hour later.
About an hour and a half later.
So that whole time you're just floating around in the ocean.
Yeah, and luckily our tablet, which we were using for navigation, I was able to see where we were. We're in the middle of the channel in the Delaware River, which is a big commercial channel. I guess luckily there was no traffic coming through. So it was very interesting to watch our progress because I'm worried we're going to go into the shallows, hit something hard, and damage the boat. But we ended up kind of doing circles there with no power.
Was there any wind?
There was some. I think the wind and the current were just counter to each other, so the wind would blow us and the current would bring us back. It wasn't a strong wind.
But you didn't want to sail because you were worried about the rig?
I didn't want to sail because it didn't occur to me soon enough.
Okay.
With that being said, I don't know that if we had no other choice, if it was abandon the boat or sail, we would have tried to sail. But we had evidence that something had gone wrong with the rigging, with the boom coming down. Even the surveyor that they sent out, he wouldn't go up the mast, and he wouldn't let anyone else go up the mast. He's like, I don't trust it.
Yeah.
So we did have it as a emergency option. The next day, our buddy boat, the captain, came over and helped us partially re-raise our sail so we could fix all the lines that got tangled up in the emergency drop. And Sea Tow was able to get us to an anchorage in Cape May, and I don't know how many people are familiar with that anchorage. It is not large, and it is right next to a channel, and there were a lot of boats already there, so they towed us more or less into places they could get us, and the windlass would let out chain and not bring it back in, and it would not stop. So we were able to drop the anchor by going into the electrical room completing the circuit, let it drop, and guess how much line we were letting out, or chain we were letting out. The chain counter, funny enough, did work, but it was all kinds of screwed up because it was counting all the chain that the windlass was letting out onto deck earlier, and no one was up at the helm station anyway to look at it. So we got anchored, and the unfortunate part is I didn't realize that we still had steering, so our rudders were turned a little bit off what they should have been, so we did not behave like the other boats around us on current changes and wind. Ended up little monohull right next to us. It's a German couple, didn't understand English very well. I definitely don't speak any German. So they're like, oh, well, if you can just shorten your chain, and we're like, we're dead in the water. We can't do anything. When they finally understood that, they moved. And then the next day they had to move again because we started floating in another weird way. And then the next night we had to get towed again because our chain didn't hold in the mud there. And the tide changes there are pretty significant.
Aggressive.
So we threw out a second emergency anchor off the back and kind of did a med mooring thing, and that held until exactly 1:30 in the morning next morning. And then that broke free, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go to sleep. I slept outside just in case someone started yelling at me, but it was an interesting experience. Sea Tow came and checked on us a couple of times a day. I found that none of the marinas there could take us in. Only 2 of them had a T-head large enough for our boat, and there was a fishing tournament going on for 2 weeks, so they had no room. So the closest place that could get us out was Yank Marine LLC in Dorchester, New Jersey, which is up some river system connected to Delaware Bay. And so Monday, we got the go-ahead from them. They said, yeah, we can pull you out. We've got room in our yard. They're a commercial yard, not a yacht yard. So their 120-ton lift made my boat look tiny. It was kind of funny to see. But they pulled us out and got us on the hard there where we're still at. And that's when we found out how bad the damage really was. It took out, our fridge still works, and my Dometic freezer that was hooked up to the 24-volt system is still running. I don't know for how much longer. But we had 2 freezers get taken out, and pretty much everything else of note on the boat was non-functional. The water pumps still worked on the boat, like the freshwater system on the boat still worked. The bilges worked. I did test those after the strike just to make sure. But the lights inside the boat, they kind of worked. And then they would stop working. And then sometimes they'd come back on and some of the lights didn't work anymore. So that system is severely damaged. Both my furlers at the front of my boat for my furlers, they don't work. Yeah, they're very new, so that's going to be painful to replace. But it was when I was talking to a very experienced surveyor that I was trying to hire to come look at the boat and get some initial estimates because he deals lightning strikes all the time. He's like, well, it's probably not that bad, on a bad strike, it'll come through the hull and do weird stuff. And he's like, and it's usually around the engine. So I go looking, and our right rear rudder has about a 3-inch section at the top where it had just blown through the fiberglass. It essentially went down the rudder, came back up, and just went out the top. Found another place in the bow thruster where lightning had burned its way through some of the fiberglass up there too. Luckily not bad enough to puncture the hull, but enough to take most of the fiberglass layers off in a fairly small area, maybe 2 or 3 inches by 1 inch wide. And that's when he said, okay, you got obscenely lucky. Because a strike this bad was easily a strike bad enough to punch out all your through holes. Well, it turns out, good news, European boat, they do not ground their through holes. They don't tie them into the electrical system at all. They aren't used for grounding plates like American boats are. And my other surveyor said, hey, if these had been grounded, there's no way you wouldn't have lost some of your through holes. And we also have underwater lights, which are another super common thing to get blown out of the bottom of the boat. The underwater lights are completely shot, but none of them got blown off the boat.
And what type of through holes do you have? Are they bronze or are they plastic or like Marlion?
It's a combination. So there are some newer Mylar ones, but most of the through holes are still bronze.
Okay. And they were fine.
They all look fine.
Wow.
The grounding plate on the starboard side was black.
Okay.
And the grounding plate on the port side was a little discolored, but not by much. So we assume most of the damage on the starboard, which, by the way, we already knew, because the master cabin, almost nothing worked in there anymore. None of the lights and things like that.
What about your kitchen appliances, like stove, fridge, inverters?
Okay. Inverters are easy. So we have 3 Victron Quattro 8K inverters that were all linked together, because this boat could pull up to 16 kilowatt hours. One of the 3 was just outright dead after the strike. 2 of them seemed to be working. The previous owner helped me reprogram it. I had a backup Starlink on the boat. In fact, I had 2 backup Starlinks on the boat. I deployed one, was able to get internet access once we were at anchor the next day. And the previous owner had programmed the Victrons himself. So he was trying to walk me through how to program it, and it wasn't working. So he's like, just let me remote in. So he remoted into my laptop while I was hooked up to the Victron systems, and we reprogrammed the 2 to work together. It said it was good. It said it was processing 50 amps each, but no power was coming out. So they were talking, but they weren't actually working.
Yeah.
So we took the middle unit out, completely turned it off, reprogrammed the first unit to work by itself, which means the bigger appliances just wouldn't work on the boat. It wouldn't have enough inverter power. That lasted us for 1.5 days before that inverter stopped inverting. So it still allows us to charge the battery bank, and it still allows for pass-through shore power, but it won't invert anymore. So
all 3 inverters are toast.
Yes. The battery banks, we also know, are at least partially damaged, because when the inverter was working, they were discharging at very different rates. Some of the batteries stayed at 100%, some were at like 60. So we know there's damage there as well. There was a 2,000 watt independent inverter for the kitchen to do some of the appliances in there, and it also lasted for 2 days before it said, hey, you're drawing too much power. So I did a hard reset on it a few times, and then I unplugged the wire taking power out of the unit, so nothing was drawing power. Same error. So disconnected that.
Toast.
So pretty much every inverter on the boat is just gone. We have a couple of handhelds that we used, which allowed me to run extension cords to at least keep our refrigerator running. That is the only appliance on the boat currently still running that we know of. So we have no way of testing some of them without the battery bank and the inverter being back up, because American 230 50 hertz is not 230 50 hertz, and we know a lot of our electronics just don't work with that slight discrepancy. So it's an interesting situation we found ourselves in at the yard we're at. Big yard, big equipment, but they don't specialize in yachts. Yeah. So we had a very hard time getting anything started with insurance, because they want something that they'll never get, which is just take it to a yard and get us one big quote to fairy tale fix everything. And I'm like, you've never worked with a boat clean, have you? But they ended up having to get one of their own surveyors in the area to come out and assess the boat. So we're using him instead of the guy I wanted to use. The guy I wanted to use, just his timeline was so far out that didn't make practical sense. So had a lot of help on the way, a lot of support from the community. Someone from the community lives an hour and a half away. He came out to the boat, looked at it, we had dinner, got some other plans with him when he gets back from vacation. So we've had support there. I actually flew back to Texas. We had been hotel hopping for about 2 weeks before we found out insurance does not recoup living expenses on the policy we have.
Oh.
So decided we had to change that tactic. Flew back to Texas by myself. I still had a truck down there. So I got my truck, and my sister and brother-in-law let us borrow this almost brand new to them camper. And I put 1,500 miles on it driving back. Found a nice campground here in New Jersey, and
You're camped
this is
out.
where we're currently camping out at.
Man, that's some bad luck, unfortunately. Some good luck too, I suppose. With a broader perspective, that the boat didn't sink.
Yep.
But some bad luck all around. How's the family dealing with it all?
My kids are young. They'll find things to do everywhere. They're doing
adaptable.
pretty well. It's been harder on my wife. She's by far the more social one, and uncertainty is not something she likes at all. So this has been really emotionally hard for her. Still working through that, trying to find things to make it easier. So from the family perspective, it's a little tough, but we're still better off than we were hotel jumping. That was really hard. It's like, why jump hotels? Because apparently New Jersey is popular in the summer. We're too close to the coast, and they're always booked out during the weekend, so we kept having to find different hotels.
We got some stability now in the campsite. Yeah, that's nice. And so what's the prognosis? So you found out there's a lot of crap broken, and had the survey done, got a pretty good idea what needs to be done. How are you going about the repair process? How long do you think it's going to take? Where are you going to get it done? Do you have any idea on that stuff?
Yep. So we had looked at taking it to Pier 7 in Annapolis. They are a Lagoon service center, and they would be more than happy to take us, especially if this is a slow time of the year for them. They would have been happy for the work. The yard we're in, again, doesn't specialize in yachts. However, we're going to try to avoid pulling the boat out of the water again. We want to do everything below the water line here in New Jersey. And we also want to get the rigging done here. So the surveyor, the guy I wanted to use, and the insurance surveyor said, we have to take the mast off the boat to inspect it. So finding a company that was willing to come to New Jersey to do that was a little bit hard, but we found a company out of New York that's happy to do the work and send a team down for a couple of days to take it off and a couple of days to put it back up and do any repairs that need to be done to it. So we're going to get the mast off and assessed here to see what all needs to be done. Obviously, the VHF antenna and probably most of the electronics. I assume the radar is probably shot too. And I'm also planning on, out of my own pocket, putting a lightning prevention system on the boat. Don't know if they work. They claim to work.
Might as well, yes.
It would be prohibitively expensive probably for the average boat to put one on. But our boat has so many electronics on it that, I'm not going to be out of pocket for the repairs. But the time we're going to be out of. We're a month and a half in, and not a single repair has happened yet. So that's a whole other part of the story.
Been a month and a half since you got hit by lightning? It's a month and a half. Oh
yeah.
My goodness.
Or maybe just under a month and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've been here for a little over 2 weeks, and we were hotel hopping for a little over 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we're 5 or 6 weeks in.
Wow. And nothing's it's just in the assessment stage still.
Yes. So their surveyor, it took a little while to get out. Took him the better part of a week to put together his report for them. Uh, and his assessment is pretty much the same as the guy that I was probably going to use. Is pretty much everything electronic on the boat is fried, and some of the wiring also is fried and needs to be replaced. But we're going to have to get electricians in to test every single wire on the boat. So that's going to be a big job. Which, by the way, not a lot of people actually want that job. The boatyard I'm at, they're happy to do any work that I've got for them. The problem is they can't do the rigging. They don't have the people for it. We could get an electric company that's close to do the electrical. My issue with that is we need to be out of here by the end of October because winter is going to happen here, and the campgrounds are literally shutting down. So our plan is in this yard to have the engines done, back up and operational, to have
the rig,
any hull damage repaired,
and
underwater lights done, the rig done. I do want to get the autopilot fixed, even if it's not tied into navionics at this point. Just having a wind vane driven system would work for us, and a handful of other things. I'll probably have to get at least one inverter up and ordered and installed. I think the battery bank will last until the next place we want to get to, which I believe will be South Carolina.
Okay.
There's a company there I've talked to about redoing the electrical system, at least the battery bank and the Victron components. And they can do all of my navionics equipment as well. That's kind of their specialty. But in the meantime, I have another guy coming in who owns a yard in the U.S. BVI's. Well, I guess the U.S. Virgin Islands,
US
not
VIs.
the BVI's.
Yeah.
And it's kind of their off season as well. And he actually dealt with another 620 in the last year that got struck, and they had to replace everything as well. He's very familiar with the 620, so he's going to come in and help identify all of the bits and pieces that need to be ordered from Lagoon, and get that order put in so we can have the equipment here in the U.S. to do the repairs. And that could technically be done anywhere in the U.S.
The other boat that got hit that this guy knows, how long did it take to get it fixed?
I think he told me it was pretty close to a year. Their situation was a little bit different. They were not in the U.S. territory when it got struck. Their boat was more complex than mine, believe it or not. They had a carbon fiber mast. They also took a direct mast hit. But what they did is they also did that repair in stages. Essentially, they got it seaworthy up to the level that their insurance said, okay, you can move the boat now. And then they got it to the U.S. Virgin Islands to do the rest of the work. And the way they did it, since it was owned by a company, they just did $300,000 of repairs at a time and submitted all that to insurance to get reimbursed, and then did another $300,000. And give you an idea, that repair ended up being close to $900,000 for that boat. Again, their system was a little more complex than ours. So we've got a ballpark of what it's likely going to cost insurance to get everything fixed here in the U.S. And it's a big number. It's a very big number.
Yeah.
Which is why we could look at a lightning protection system that's going to cost around $20,000 to get installed and say it's worth it to us.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at least probably at least another 4 months, if not 6. Being repaired by the end of the year would be a good scenario for us.
Yeah. Or being 80% repaired by the end of the year would be a great scenario. Like functional, boat usable. Maybe not everything 100%, but boat usable. Yeah.
Yeah. All critical systems having me and my family back on board, living the boat life, is what we're aiming for
by the end of the year.
And we think we can get there in about 4 months. being ready to set sail and do not an ocean crossing. That's not our plan right now, but to jump across to, say, Grenada.
To go remote and be like,
Yeah.
to be self-sustainable and reliable, you need probably another few months.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Shoot, man. That's you're going to be the Lagoon expert though, after this, the Lagoon 620 expert.
Yeah. There's the Facebook is a great place to network with people with similar boats. So I'm part of a Lagoon 620 and up owners group, and they've answered some questions for me. And so it's been a great community outreach just everywhere.
So you mentioned something before, like when you were hit by the lightning, you didn't have a plan. What would you plan for based on, I mean, you're going to know more as you get into this more, but what would you like, what you know now? This is always what we don't know that ends up biting us. So now that you know some things that you didn't know and that we all know, because this is not a super common occurrence.
Yes.
What would you plan for?
One, before the onset of a storm or at the onset of a storm, I would almost certainly go disconnect as much navionics as I can, like disconnect the VHF antenna from the VHF controller, because you might be able to save your radio system, if not the antenna itself. And that in turn might save some of your other navionics. My understanding is navionics are like the first thing to go in a lightning strike or even an indirect strike. They're very sensitive, but being able to preserve the actual radio would be a massive plus in this scenario. Even the Coast Guard getting on the line, they're just like, first things first, everybody on that boat needs to have a life jacket on. We have a pile of emergency life jackets sitting right by the inside helm station. And guess what? None of us were wearing at the time I got that call, like 15, 20 minutes after the strike. We weren't wearing them because it wasn't crossing my mind, because we didn't have a plan in place saying, hey, you should do the most basic thing. If your boat sinks, you would better have a life jacket on. So plans are important in that way, because in the moment, you forget about the most obvious stuff. It did not occur to me, we could still raise our mainsail and get to Cape May.
Yeah.
Didn't cross my mind. And we could have. As far as I know, we can still sail the boat. It would be uncomfortable. I have never practiced anchoring my boat from a sail position before, because it's a huge boat. That would be very disconcerting. But that being said, there should be a plan in place. One, you start with prevention. Okay, you've got a storm coming in. Okay, we're going to disconnect the VHF antenna.
Would you shut off the engines?
I toyed with the idea of putting a big disconnect switch somewhere in the lines going from the battery bank to the holes or something. So lights and things maybe I could isolate and prevent them from going out. So that's prevention. The next case would be, especially in the case of a buddy boat, because we had a buddy boat in this case, I should have been in communication with them when we saw the storm rolling in, just saying, hey, it looks like we're going to get caught in a storm. We don't expect anything to happen, but just keep a lookout for us. They've got us up on AIS, and they're tracking us, and if they all of a sudden see that we stop moving and we haven't updated in 30 minutes and they haven't heard from us, that would be a good indicator for them to say, hey, there might be something wrong here. Mm-hmm. So I definitely would say buddy boats are good. They came in clutch for us here. And
who are you buddy
make that
with?
part of your plan. Jeff, it wasn't Jeff Bloom, it was Jeff Strebel, yeah. So him, and he had his kids on board, so they were watching the lightning show from many miles away.
They were outside of it.
Yeah, they were. Good on them. Yeah, I wouldn't wish that situation on anybody. It was just me and a couple of tankers that were anchored about 7 miles away. So we had that, and then I would just say, you should know where your emergency equipment is. Mm-hmm. I have an emergency water bilge pump that's huge. I mean, it can pump a lot of water really fast. In this situation, I have no idea how I would have hooked it up to power because we lost almost all of our plugs. Most of them didn't work. So I would have had no idea how to run emergency power to that 24-volt pump. Batteries were working. Bus bars were working. I could have gotten power out of them, but I had no plan in place on how to power that emergency water pump. So I'm thinking of the super practical things, and the non-practical things is how not to freak your family out further. Luckily, I'm a pretty calm guy in emergencies. But that isn't always comforting to your wife, being super calm in an emergency either. But my kids weren't really that scared because they didn't know there was anything to be scared of. So they behaved. They went back to bed. And me and my wife dealt with as much as we could. Know who the captain is. It became important. My wife started wanting to ask why on everything, and I'm like, this is not the time to ask why. This is the time to act, and then figure things out later, and we can go review it after the fact. Once I let her know, I'm like, we're not out of an emergency yet just because we're not sinking. It was a blunt way to put it. It wasn't very kind, but it was necessary. If you're the captain, you're the captain, and this is the type of scenario where everybody on that boat's life is being put at risk or being made safer by your decisions and your actions. And, me with my family on board, that's always on my mind. It's always a consideration. Getting the boat fixed up enough to get down to South Carolina or wherever I end up taking it, I'm not putting my family on that boat for that trip. There's zero, even if I get all of the systems I want done, I still will not put my family on that boat. It's not worth the risk. Don't be wrong. I'll call my brother in and say, hey, let's go take a boat to South Carolina, even though you have no sailing experience. I'll do that. But no, not my wife and kids.
Not your wife and kids. Brother's expendable.
Exactly. But it's the plan needs to be more than just if X, then Y. It needs to be adaptable. And I think anyone who's ever been in an emergency and had to manage it understands your plans are never perfect. And they're never going to be. And don't freak out if the situation doesn't fit your plan very well. If there had been a hole in our boat, then it wouldn't have mattered what my plan was. Fixing the hole in the boat is the only thing that matters.
But just having, I think you're right in just having thought through, oh, hey, what would I do in this event? When you're in the event, like things like you said, like the basic things, like putting on your life jackets and that stuff, if you haven't thought through it, it's the first that you just don't think about it because there's so many things going on in your head. That's why people train. That's why they do training, so that you don't have to think, you just do because oh, right, I've practiced this, so I know this is just what I need to do now. So, I was watching a podcast the other day. It's kind of off a tangent, but as a guy who was like a combat paramedic, and he got in a motorcycle accident and flew into a concrete box and shattered his hip, and it cut the artery in his hip, so he's bleeding out on the side of the road. And like, if that happened to me, I would just bleed out because I wouldn't be able to think to do anything. But he had all this training, so he just literally went into like, okay, take off my belt, tie my belt around to create a tourniquet, talk to guy who's over there, tell him to put pressure point on me, and he survived. They stopped the bleeding, and the guy survived. And that's just training and planning, right? So, but can't plan for everything because there's things that we don't know to plan for. But that's why I think it's good to talk about this kind of stuff because I've never talked to anybody who got hit by lightning like that before.
Yeah, and I think it might help just from a perspective of, I was the captain and we knew I was going to be the captain in emergencies also. But it does help to know your temperament. If you're one to freeze in stressful situations and your partner or someone else on board isn't,
Like,
You
should
might
be the
have that
captain.
discussion. Just say, hey,
Yeah.
if these events happen, you're taking over. You're the captain. Because I'm very much so the guy that when an emergency happens, I've had some pretty bad injuries myself, and my brain just shuts out everything but do this, do that, do this, do that. Um, and it takes a while before my body catches up, and says, okay, now all of the adrenaline is going to alter what you do and how you think. Um, but that's not super common, you know.
Yeah.
People hit something they don't know, and maybe you've never been in that situation. You don't know what you would do, but it helps if you know that you will freeze. Have a plan for that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it helps to have the like you just said, to have the conversation about it with the crew. So that I think, I mean, we talked about this in our trainings, is you need to have a captain on board. If there is no captain, and it's for this specific scenario that you're talking about, it's for the emergency. Because if there's two people trying to run the show in an emergency, then nothing gets done. There needs to be one person that has and you're 100% right on the temperament. You need to know that before you go do something like this. You need to know your temperament. You need to at least have some idea, hey, if this goes sideways, how am I going to react? And because if you don't, and you end up in a situation like that, that's bad news. So I got to ask, having been through everything, you know, going through, you got the boat, you're now in this situation. Do you regret the decision to go sailing?
No, no, and quite a few people have asked that question. Like, and people ask my wife, and she's much more emotional. They're like, "Are you going to attempt it again after all of that?" And it wasn't until people started questioning her that she started getting concerned about it. I don't regret it. It definitely wasn't part of our sail plan. Um, you shouldn't make it part of your sail plan because it's a stupid thing to plan for.
Yeah.
It happens, and when it happens, you just got to deal with it. And there are a lot of different ways to deal with it. You could. Uh, it would probably be easy if we really went through the boat and found all of the damage and reported all of the things. We could get up to the number where they would just total my boat. And if we wanted to, we could probably just take a payout,
Walk away.
and do something else. That is not what we want to do. This has been my dream, and yeah, this is a setback. But at the same time, there were a lot of things on the systems that I wanted to modify. Previous owner did a great job kitting the boat out for exactly how they use the boat. Well, just one difference in the way we use the boat made a huge difference in the usability of the boat, which is we want to run the AC to be cool at night. ACs are a huge power draw. The battery bank just wasn't there for it. It's a huge battery bank. It's obscene. Anybody else who heard me complaining about this, who owns a boat, would want to punch me in the face. It's 46 kilowatt hours. And it just so happens that our boat is big enough that we have such a huge set of chiller units on the boat. It just pulls that much power. So don't feel sorry for the guy with the big boat. But at the same time, the inverters were okay. They were sized correctly. The battery bank wasn't, which also means, it's not the best generator for the boat for the amount of power we use. Don't get me wrong, there were some other issues there with the charging, which we'll fix now that we know about them. But so there's another way to look at it. Yeah, it stinks. Yes, everything's delayed 6, 8 months. Who knows at this point? But at the end of the day, we're going to have all new electronics on this boat. We're going to know
Yeah.
the boat inside and out. Previous owner did everything he could to get me as up to date on how the systems were designed and where the wiring is, but 4 weeks is not enough time to learn a boat.
Yep.
So at the
It's
end of
not even
this, we're going
close.
to know our boat better, and we're going to
Yep.
be able to make some minor modifications to make it much more usable for us.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're not giving up. I didn't expect that you would be, but and I think it is. It's a setback. It's a fairly significant setback, but it's you can come out the other side for sure. And I've talked. I don't know if you ever saw the podcast I did with the Mortels, and their boat burned down when they were
Oh,
like
ouch.
2 months. Not even. I think it's very similar. Like they were They set off from Florida. They were in the Bahamas and the boat burned down. And same deal. They went back, but that was, the boat was done. It was gone. It burned down. It burned down. And they bought another boat, and they run adventures for us in the Pacific now. So they're like that, and then there's also Brian. Is it Brian? Brian, he got hit by lightning twice. Once going into the Turks and Caicos, I think, and then they brought the boat back to Florida. We're getting it fixed in Florida and Fort Lauderdale, and it got hit by lightning while it was getting fixed. So
we definitely had some thunderstorms roll through, and me and the boatyard owner was like, I really hope that doesn't get struck
hit again. Yeah. So I think in some ways, like, I think the reason I shared those stories is in some ways it's like just shit happens when you go and embark on this type of an adventure. And that's probably the most blunt way to put it, is just it's part of the adventure. There's going to be crap that goes wrong. And to your point, you can make a plan, but you have to be able to adapt the plan. You can make a sail plan. Something is going to happen. Maybe you're going to get hit by lightning. Hopefully not. But something will happen. And it's your ability to, I think, to like fall over, get back up again, and keep going, that makes the people that actually are successful doing this do it. It's not quitters that do this. That's for sure. Good. So otherwise there'd be a lot of people doing it.
Yep.
So cool, man. Well, is there anything like in everything that you've gone through, and I appreciate you're in the middle of it right now and you're learning lots, and there's going to be lots of learning that comes out the other side. But as far as what you've got through right now and the whole process you've gone through, for people that are watching this, because typically people are watching this that are interested in getting into the lifestyle. And we just told them a whole scary story that I hope doesn't scare the shit out of them and have them not do this. But is there anything that you would want to share with the audience, is like, keeping in mind that that's the audience?
I think the thing that I found the most difficult after the fact in the process was understanding what insurance is and isn't going to do and how their process works. And I know every insurance company is a little bit different. Mine wasn't going to provide a surveyor or anybody to begin with. They expected me to get all the quotes and everything to them. And when they found out the yard couldn't provide that service, that's when they went and found a surveyor. Understand, that surveyor works for them, not for you. I like the surveyor they picked. He's got a lot of experience, really good terms with him. But understand, that survey report didn't come to me. It went to the insurance. I haven't seen it. He told me basically what he put on there for what he thinks the repairs are going to take. And he said, there's a whole lot of caveats in there. Here's all the systems we couldn't look at. Expect there to be more damage. How incredibly slow the process was to start. I mean, I got my first payments to me from insurance last week, a month into the process. And I had paid several things out of pocket. Had to pay the yard to haul the boat out, had to pay the yard for the first month of storage and electrical, because we do have power running to the boat. The towing company, they're fun. By fun, I'm being very sarcastic. Love the guy who towed the boat. Very personable, good experience. It's hard to say it was a ripoff because we got where we needed to go, but it was for more money than my insurance even allows for emergency tows and wreck removal. It was around $26,000 for 2 tows. One to Cape May and then one to the yard here, which was probably about a 35, 40-mile trip from Cape May to where the boat is now. But since the paperwork they have you sign essentially allows them to act on your behalf with insurance, they just build insurance directly, and my agent didn't know enough to push back on that number, so they just paid them. That happened way before I ever got a payment. But since we started getting payments and now I understand exactly what they need, their surveyor, I thought they might make a payout based on the survey. It's not what they do. It's just for them to have a ballpark idea of what they should expect to be paying out on this claim. So every piece of work has to be estimated, submitted, approved. I get the money, then I pay it out. You can authorize the yard you're at to deal directly with insurance. You shouldn't. You probably never should do that, because that's when all of a sudden everything gets way more expensive and you no longer have control and oversight on what they're doing with the boat. Don't get me wrong, like the yard I'm at, I don't believe that they would do that at this yard, but this yard is not where I'm getting most of my work done, so there's no point in me doing that here. They're going to do some major stuff on the boat for sure, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket of the total repairs needed.
The towing thing is interesting. So based on this experience, like if you had a membership, I know some towing companies have memberships. If you had a membership with this towing company, would the tow have been the same cost?
So I asked that because I actually joined C-Tow between my first and second tow, because I'm like, in this situation, I just want to have a membership. It would not have covered this type of tow. That only covers tows with like generic breakdowns where, oh, my engine's having trouble, come tow me back in or something like that. When it is a catastrophic, nothing works, it falls into a different category that's not covered by any of the membership levels. So it apparently would not have changed anything.
How do they define that? Hey, my engine's broke. It got hit by lightning. It doesn't work.
Me and you have the same questions. I haven't looked into it. It's not important enough. But being a member did not give me a discount on the second tow. We'll just put it that way.
Wow. You should just tell them your alternator wasn't working so you couldn't start your engine.
Alternators are fried. I don't. It's like, why aren't you sailing? I'm not that good of a sailor. I don't know. Why aren't your lights working? I don't know. Funny enough, our anchor light, for some reason, was on after the strike. And as far as I know, it's still on, because I have no way of turning it off with all my systems fried. But it was literally the only light left on outside of my cabins on the entire boat. So the anchor light was working and nothing else. So I guess any other interesting things that I found out were, one, if you're thinking about getting engines replaced, make sure you have quotes before you get struck by lightning, because being struck by lightning makes things a little more complicated when you're trying to get a quote, because numbers will get inflated. And maybe rightfully so, because sometimes you can reuse wiring, not after a lightning strike. So, some other fun things we just found is that you think about going into a yard and getting everything done in that one yard, and that's probably true in South Florida. You can probably get anything done in a yard in South Florida. But when you're not in a yacht hotspot, good luck finding the people to do it. So we've got a Volvo dealer who luckily was pretty close, and there's one electronics company that works on the commercial stuff that could probably work on my boat in this area. And that's it. There are no riggers in the area. There were no boat surveyors in the area, and things like that. So the yard I'm in, they make their money off subcontractors by tacking on a percentage on top of that, which makes it very expensive to get work done here. Not holding against the boatyard, they need to make money somehow, and if their people can't do the work, then they're still going to get paid. But it was interesting on looking where to go next to repair the boat. So South Carolina, we stopped in Charleston on the way up, and we had a radio reprogram, ran across a guy who specializes in doing some of the electrical stuff on a boat. Talked with that company and planning on having them do some, but they don't really want to touch the Lagoon wiring. So they're happy to build out the battery system, the Victron system, the navionics, but they don't specialize in Lagoons. And they straight up told another Lagoon customer of theirs at one point that wanted to replace their E-Plex system, they said, we could charge you an absurd amount of money, but we don't want the work, so we're not even going to give you a quote. It would take us so long, we would lose customers because I'd have to dedicate so much time. So instead, I found a guy who's done the work and knows the guy who created the E-Plex system, and he subcontracts that guy. So it'll be done sooner by having that set up. I looked at replacing the E-Plex system, and it's too massive, and they brought up a good point. If you change a system, the next owner is not going to be able to find someone to service it because it's a custom system. So even if you don't like the system that's on board, you're still better off replacing it with the exact same style system. So at least a Lagoon service center somewhere in the world could work on it.
Can deal with it. Fair enough. That's a good point. Interesting, man. I'm excited to hear more of the lessons learned as they come out.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you guys I'm really glad to hear that you're going to keep going. And I'm glad that Ariel is plugged into the community and can get that support. It's not easy what you're going through. I think I've said it before. Everybody runs into a brick wall at some time when they start this and falls over. You ran into a pretty big one. So
yeah, I guess another piece of advice out there, we were pretty sure our lightning strike wasn't catastrophic, but it was. And how we can tell that it was is there was fiberglass damage in the hull. We had not planned to pull the boat out of the water initially. We're just going to get everything fixed because we assumed that there was no hull damage because there was no water coming in. Luckily for us, the only yard that could take our boat in had to pull us out. They don't have docks, and that's when we found that damage. So never make assumptions about how bad something is. If it could be bad enough where you need to pull out to inspect, don't cheap out on that, because if I pulled out the next time next year and found that damage, it would have more water damage. It would be a bigger job, and it would be outside the coverage for insurance.
Yeah. That's I remember that. And some, not all insurance policies, I don't know if yours had this, but mine had this, which you could pull, they would pay for the hull of the boat for a hull inspection in the event of something happening. So if you had accidentally grounded the boat, somebody hit you, whatever, if you thought that there was damage to below the waterline, you didn't have to pay deductible. You just tell them, hey, I want to haul the boat for an inspection of the hull because this happened, and they approve it and they'll pay for the hull. So don't know if all insurance policies had that, but mine did. And I used it.
Yeah. I don't think mine does. Don't get me wrong. It's part of the lightning strike claim. So I paid the deductible. Essentially, my deductible was the haul out for my policy. Some people are like, oh, that's cheap. Well, not for a Lagoon 620, it's not. So I will say that our policy had a very good deductible for lightning for us. It was $5,000. That's cheap for the value of our boat.
Yeah.
I talked to someone else in the community who's just across Delaware Bay, an indirect strike, and they're repairing out of pocket because their deductible is more than 10 times what my deductible is.
Wow, for lightning strike.
On their policy. So
such a wide variation, in insurance policies. It's unreal. It's insane how different they can be. Which is another lesson learned. Make sure you understand your insurance policy, because
make real sure, because my claims agent doesn't understand my policy.
That's the problem. That's 90% of them. They don't. Even the person the person who sells you the policy doesn't understand the policy and how most of them. compared to the other policies out there. So you really need to understand it yourself.
Well, she thought my coverage was $200,000 on my boat, period, with my policy. And I'm like, you're missing a one. You're missing the leading one. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you about this because it's in writing. So I talked to my agent who I bought the insurance from. I'm like, someone needs to correct her understanding because this will not cover the repairs on this boat. And he looked at my policy and he's like, yeah, no, she's just wrong.
Yeah, you're right. Cool. All right, man. Well, thank you for taking the time. Appreciate you sharing the story. I think it'll be beneficial for people to hear. It's beneficial for me to hear. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all goes and getting regular updates and hopefully seeing you in the Keys. In January. Yeah, I guess that's the goal, eh? Be ready to get down there. That would be awesome if that all comes together. And as always, let us know if we can do anything to help. I know we've kind of helped a little bit here and there. The community's been super supportive, which has been amazing. So, but let us know if we can be of more help. And to everybody that is watching, thank you for watching and listening to Chris's story. Comment down below if you guys have any comments on this, any suggestions, or anything at all that you want to know. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Bluewater Cruising podcast. Chris, thanks again. Really appreciate taking the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.